Today I speak with Amber. Amber has been observed by government entities, has reached higher states of consciousness, and is able to remember several of her past lives. First question we're going to start out with, Amber. You said that you had a hospital stay at one point. Could you tell us about the events leading up to that stay at the hospital and what happened?
In the month, leading up to it, I was given a sheet of LSD by a friend of mine who is in the National Guard. And I just, gave it to me for free because I expressed interest in it. And to me, it was very heavenly, very beautiful, very pleasurable. But I guess I just did it so often and I was meditating on it too. And, lots of feelings of oneness and that kind of thing. And there was this overarching theme of something happening as far as my connection to some secret hidden thing in society. Prior to the hospitalization, I stopped doing the LSD and I also stopped smoking weed just because I felt like I didn't need them anymore. It kind of just felt like it was just paper I was putting in my mouth. I didn't feel like I was doing drugs or anything. And so I just stopped everything. Things were very weird, in terms of consciousness and dream states and lucid dreaming and not being able to really differentiate between waking state and dream state. And looking back on it, there's a missing day that's just completely gone from my memory. So I went to an art show that my friend was going to, and it felt like that was the night. Whatever was going to happen was going to happen that night. It ended up being completely not the case. And I was they were trying to help me get home, and I just wasn't in the right realm to understand what they were saying. They were like, "What state are you in? What mental state?" I was like, "I'm in Louisiana." But anyway, so I ended up spending the night at that bar where it was taking place, kind of just roaming around. And in the morning when the sun rose, I was like, this is the Buddha's third eye and whatever. And then the workers at the bar noticed me behaving strangely and called the police. And I remember really feeling scattered. At a certain point, I was like, I'm not okay. Whatever's going on, I'm not okay. And I fell to the ground and screamed I need help. And then the cop rolled up immediately, which was weird. And I walk up and I'm like, can you say namaste and shake my hand? Clearly I'm not okay. They're like, oh, hold on a minute. And then they ended up bringing me home. And then I was still behaving weirdly. And then the cop got called again. And they ended up bringing me to the hospital and sort of coerced me into signing up when I didn't really know what I was signing into to be admitted. So that on record, that's a voluntary admittance into the psych ward, but I wasn't aware of that at the time. And then it really felt like, the technology was more advanced than it probably was. The wheelchair felt like it was moving on its own, and other things. But I eventually was kind of brought into this little isolation room. I was given a blanket, and it had just a chair in the middle, and they left the door cracked open, and two doctors were outside, and I heard clear as day, "Isn't that the one from Area 51? And my anxiety levels really started to rise. I looked over and I was like, what? And then they led me back out, and I was surrounded in the hallway. There were police guards and just a bunch of people around me. And I saw underneath, I saw an opening, and I ducked under the security guard's arm just like that and ran into a room. And I was like, I got to get out of here. I felt like I was being trapped. And then it was just a room. So like they obviously trapped me, picked me up, put me on a table and gave me butt shots. And I woke up 24 hours later, like 300 miles away in a city that was mentioned the night before. And I was freaking out. I was like, I'm done. I'm a government lab rat now. That's it. So that's kind of the hospital stay itself. But that doesn't include that missing day and the memory I recovered from that day after getting out.
Okay. So I guess the first question that sticks out when they say, "Is that the one from Area 51?" Do you have any conscious memory or anything that relates to Area 51? Like, did that trigger something in your head, or is that just like the only time you heard of it?
No, I definitely was aware of Area 51, and I was aware, at least subconsciously, that certain things in relation to my birth had stuff to do with genetic modification and also certain things about quote unquote like highly advanced spiritual beings.
Okay, so let's get more into that, especially with the genetic modification. What experiences have you had that you believe led up to that hospital stay? We had a conversation before about your experience getting into higher states of consciousness. Do you mind explaining to people kind of like how you came to found how you come to find how to get to that higher state of consciousness and what kind of effects it has on you?
Yeah. So this was after all that hospital jazz and kind of like before I had a false sense of enlightenment. Like I'm enlightened, but I didn't know what I was enlightened about. And I came out of it and I was like really, really suffering. And I read like the Buddhist definition basically of enlightenment is the end of suffering. And so I kind of had to humble myself and uh, you know, just be honest. And I just started being honest to myself and to others, which I think is a crucial aspect of being able to purify yourself and begin to open up to have the possibility of entering genuine higher states of consciousness. And another aspect of that whole self honesty was just an intense, I want to know, like whatever it is that is known when you get enlightened or whatever, the truth, I want to know it. I need to know it. And that's triggered like a self inquiry that was really intense and lasted like 6 months, where it's just like, I exist. I've always like been dumbfounded by that. Just existence itself and us being that. Um, and I guess since a kid, like I mentioned momentary higher states of consciousness where I just focus really intensely on my being and it's like my being, and it's really, really blissful. And it's hard to explain. But it was so like powerful and it would like shoot me out of the experience. Like I would go there and I'd be like I'm not ready for that. Basically at the age of 8, having, a super conscious experience. My body wasn't prepared, my mind wasn't prepared. So then the self-inquiry happens, like, what is God exactly? I need to know. And kind of just really forcing myself to sit down and meditate and focus and try and focus on one thing. And I would start off like focusing on one thing and I'm bouncing everywhere 15 times a second. But like really sitting down and just doing the work consistently and with an intense desire to know the truth so much that you just forget about worldly things, like it's just not important. And you kind of gradually but quickly, at least for me, become calm and start to to realize, start to like subtly understand certain things, like how the universe works. Like I can't make enlightenment happen. It has to be a conspiracy of the whole universe for this event. It's like it's a every time someone's enlightened, it's a cosmic event. Um, so I was just like, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna be God's will, not my own. I can't do it. So I like unknowingly like this idea of surrender is common in spiritual circles. Like just you need to surrender and accept things, but like no one told me that. It was just like a natural, just utter surrender. Like I give up everything. I can't do it. Um, and also love of love and devotion to love, devotion, and service to the Supreme helps soften you up and purify you, I guess. And yeah, that kind of led to what was a awakening of sorts, where really the only way it can happen is if your focus is one pointed to a point that it's unfathomable. And I had no control over that. It was mostly by accident, I like to say. Um, Accident slash grace. But, you know, focusing on my ear and the sound of a bird coming from outside to inside, pondering that, like, how does it get from out there to in here where I experience it as sound? Because out there it's just a vibration, you know, it's not sound. Like it's only sound when it's in your head. So yeah, really focusing on that ear, and the sound would like come in, hit the eardrum, and the malleus, and the incus, and the stapes, and wind around the cochlea, and then coming to that nerve, things just kind of like collapsed. My focus collapsed to such a point of the like, easiest way to describe it is a negative infinity. Like it reached such a fine point that it like inverted reality, and all that was left was void consciousness, the absolute reality, basically. That which everything is laid upon, in which everything appears. And since then, it's been really easy because like that's just what you are. So it's kind of like someone says your name, like you don't have to remember it. It's just what you are, basically. Like no one has to remind you of things like that. And you know, when my eyes opened, everything was like made of it, of me, of that reality. Like so hard to explain.
Yeah, I actually, because I have some personal experience, I'll weigh in here. Yeah, when you describe, like, I personally, we'll talk about this more later. I believe that some people like you have this knowledge before being born, and that's like a re-remembrance. Because a lot of people that have this, like, they innately kind of had a head start on people. Because you think, okay, you want to go inside your head and you want to talk to the divine or whatever you want to phrase it as. The thing is, you can't come along. Like your ego and your own body can't go with you, so you have to like completely shut off. You describe it as a reverse infinite, which I really like, because that's almost the experience that you have when you're trying to project to that space. Is you have to kill yourself, get to a fixed point, and then it like opens up within itself. It's pretty fun, and people, they question this, and it sounds like a fantasy, but the truth is, how often do you spend in your three-dimensional life with all the earthly problems, and how much do you spend actually trying to get to that fixed point? The truth is, not many people ever spend any time ever doing that. They're like, but I got work in 30 minutes, or I have to wake up and do something. It's like, yeah, if you don't have time, neither is the divine. Obviously, you got to show them that you're worthy of it. Um,
Yeah.
but to go on to the ears, that seems like a really great way to remind yourself that you're kind of like a signal receiver rather than an experiencer. You know what I'm saying? That all of this consciousness comes from within, and that you hearing that sound is actually a part of you existing within the universe. It's almost like your mantra in a way. It's like those sounds act as like a gateway into something bigger.
And the key feature was vibration and stillness, or sound and silence. That the two poles of the universe basically are one. Again, hard to explain, but the sound like that was out there was in here, inside silence. It's so hard to explain, but like everything that we experience is fundamentally vibration on some level, and then that which it happens within is stillness, absolute stillness. But the vibration itself is made of stillness. Fun stuff.
Yeah, it really is. When you talk to kind of like the inner workings of the divine, you have to forget pretty much everything you know of how things work here, because it's not even, we're based on like physics and gravity and worldly things. It doesn't exist in higher states of consciousness. You said you had something that you drew to help kind of illustrate this whole thing. Do you want to talk about that now? Would that be a good time?
Yeah. So it has these two lines that cross like into an X, and it shows an image of a person meditating, a bird's head with like sound waves, then the outer ear, then the eardrum, the malleus, the incus, the stapes, the cochlea, and then a nerve cell. And then right after the nerve cell, it reaches the point. And up until that point, like everything's bright and visible. And then on the next part, it's all just blackness. And the lines represent your focus, your attention, and how it literally physically gets smaller, and less of the world is perceivable, as in, the sensory world, until the sensory world completely vanishes and it's just, awareness itself. And it's an experience known as nirvikalpa samadhi in yoga. I'm sure it has other names, but that's the most common name I've seen, and I've had this like independently verified, because like nirvikalpa samadhi is like generally seen as like a big deal. If you had that, like, so I didn't want to be arrogant and be like, oh, I had nirvikalpa samadhi, but I described it, and people were like, yeah, that sounds like nirvikalpa samadhi. And so I had that written, like, this is just a representation of my experience of nirvikalpa samadhi. And it doesn't represent the whole thing, because it doesn't kind of depict opening your eyes again and the world reappearing, but that's sort of the first half of it.
Do you mind explaining the progression you had that led up to that? Like the kind of how it started and how you got to that end state of samadhi?
I honestly don't know. I don't know. I went to sit down for my daily meditation like always. I was just really super relaxed. I think that's a key part of it. You can't like be trying to get into samadhi.
Yeah.
You just have to, it's like super relaxation, super just like playfulness and being curiosity. Um, and like, what limits our ability to drop other things is like trying to do something. And when we're trying to do something, that has a whole package of ideas along with it. And so that just needs to be dropped.
I've always felt it trying to go like astral projection and stuff like that. When I go in, I go like, man, I want to go somewhere. The truth is that you can't reach a state of presence if you keep bringing up like these ideas you've had before that moment. You can't like eternally live in the present and awareness if you're still thinking about that past you going, oh, I want to get to this place. It just like blocks the signals.
I agree. And I wanted to, something you said just a bit ago, like that people who have this kind of thing generally have known it before. I had like a diary I was keeping at the time, and I had like a bunch of stuff that I wrote and kept in the diary beforehand, and then stuff I kept afterwards. And I remember waiting like a solid month to be like, is this genuine? Did I actually learn something? What happened? And after a month, I was like, something legitimate happened, and I started journaling again. And then I eventually like kept it and called it the Diary of Remembrance because it was just like it was my own self. It was like I'm remembering this. Clearly, I've forgotten it, so now I'm remembering it.
I had that exact same thing when I started doing astral projection specifically, because that's just kind of what I'm on right now. Uh,
Mhm.
I remember being like, I remember this headspace when I was like 10, 11, 12, and I just thought it was weird. I didn't know that you could go deeper into it. So it is kind of like a re-remembrance. Um, and so next, what I kind of want to talk about is physical experiences you had with these deeper states of consciousness, the good and the bad. So, do you mind explaining to me again about the seizure like symptoms and kind of that end state?
There's a bit more to that line of things. There was an instance, sort of like at the last week of December last year, where um, I was basically trying to do something, but like because I just gotten like some cities, some psychic powers, and I was like using them a little bit, and I was trying to do something, but I was under the influence and I couldn't really do it. And then I didn't want to seem like inadequate, so I kept trying and sort of would just like say things just to say something and not seem like I can't do it anymore, or that like just a little intoxication makes me unable to do it. And then like I started to feel like a burning, and that progressed so quickly and intensely uh, that I was like screaming bloody murder times 1,000, and it was like six. I just this is the way I've constantly said it. It's like 600,000 degrees frying oil, and you're just sitting in it. Really horrible, really nasty, and it like really traumatized me. And the next morning, I was like still fucked up about it, like because I thought I was being dragged into hell, basically. And I was like, no, 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 no! I want God. I don't want to go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know. I was really like fucked. I don't know how to explain it, but I was like really in a different way, a different state of consciousness, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it. And I was like, I need a break from life. So that was the only time I voluntarily admitted myself to a psych ward just so I could like chill for a bit.
Yeah.
And that basically like awakened such a powerful energy that for like 5 months straight, I was just baked in bliss that was like unexplainable, just baked in it. And then one night we were coming home from a parade. I was starting to like feel funny during the parade, like it was getting more intense. And as I went to bed, I laid down and like within moments, like I started like shaking violently, like that, and I like fell off the bed. My mom's like, What are you doing? What are you doing?" And obviously, I can't respond. I'm like shaking. Just the the energy. I don't know exactly what it is. If it's Kundalini or not, I don't know exactly uh, um, what it could be. If it's Kundalini or some other kind of energy, but I was just basically having a seizure. Is what it felt like. But I was conscious. And my mom like slapped me, tried to get me to respond. I'm like, I can't, I can't. And that lasted for like 3 hours. Just really full 10 pleasure and like full 10 pain, both at the same time. Really like super tense, but also like it's like the most intense orgasm you can imagine, just stretched for hours and hours and hours.
But it doesn't feel all great. It also, there's like an element of pain in there too.
Because your body's like seized up, and that's where the pain comes in. And that stuff, that one actually reduced my vision and hearing for a week. I was basically blind and deaf for like a week. Like after that, it started like happening again. I began to like be concerned. Basically, like we should go to the doctor for this, and I went like in the middle of an episode, and I was still shaking in the hospital, and I got diagnosed with seizure-like behavior, not seizures. And they did like an MRI or something, and it looked normal. And then later on, I kept having them, and a friend told me like seizures that last more than 5 minutes are an indication that your brain is dying. So I was like, okay, I need medicine for this then. So I went and got a prescription for Keppra, and I actually still have that medicine. And I got put into the hospital again. And I went, it was just an ER visit because I was having a really intense episode of this stuff. And I went to like sign my name in, and like I did it just fine. And then like it rushed up me, and I like fell back. I just like, boom, and like fell straight flat on the ground and hit my head. But I didn't feel any pain, like physical pain. Like I didn't feel the sensation of touching the ground. But I was still halfway aware of my surroundings. And I was being brought in, so I was like, I'm having a seizure. And the guy behind me was like, I don't know, they're not like seizing. So they were strange. And then as he said that, like I fell back. They're like, well, they're out now. Like I just had passed out. And so like they got me up on a chair. And like hospitals are horrible. They don't relay information from one office to the next as you move through. So like I get to the ER and no one knows why I'm there and things like that. But I guess because of the way I was talking, a psychiatrist admitted me involuntarily to the psych ward of the hospital. And they actually did the electrical reading. I forget what it's called, where they measure the electrical impulses, and they didn't find any unusual brain activity. So it wasn't seizures. It was just something weird going on. And I feel like it wasn't detectable on the neuron level because it had to do with subtle energy, with prana. And that is like subtle. It's not physical. You can't like pick it up.
I have some experience with that. I told you before, kind of like that stroke-like symptoms I had when I got retuned or whatever. So I got to ask you, because you experienced it, since they take brain scans, they can't find anything medical on there. Do you feel like you got tuned into the wrong frequency? Do you feel like you were being sent a message? I don't know if you had to just make an estimation, not factual, but just your own perception.
From my understanding, it was likely due to an imbalance of sorts within me, that the energy was trying to manifest, but I didn't have like a fully like balanced system to handle it, and it manifested like that, where I was shaking and experiencing pain and pleasure and all kinds of things. And then where I am now, I was able to meditate like long periods of time each day, and I got like a handle on it. Because as recently as like 3 months ago, I was still like falling over and stuff like that, but I was able to like control it, and now it only like comes up when I want it to. And if it does come up, I'm able to like be standing and talk to people. So it's interesting.
Do you feel like this would be like when you say imbalance, maybe like a chakra imbalance or something like that? Did it feel like I don't know. I'm just trying to better picture this, but did it feel like a chakra imbalance or something else?
Any imbalance would stem from a chakra imbalance, like psychological imbalance stems from chakra imbalance and things like that. So yeah, fundamentally, it would originate in the system, the energetic system.
Now that we've covered kind of that experience with those states of consciousness, would you mind telling us about your past lives? I do want to say before we get into this, a lot of people think of past lives in the wrong way. Like it's like you're remembering facts from math class. But from the people I've talked to, it's very much a very emotional experience. So sometimes it's difficult to talk about in many ways. But Amber, if you could, and whatever you feel comfortable sharing, do you mind telling us about your experience?
I don't mind sharing a little bit. From what I can remember, in my most recent life, I was a woman born female, as opposed to a woman born male, and um, I was basically like seen as a saint of sorts. And one thing I remember clearly is like behind the scenes. This is like in the 1900s. Um, I would like protect and house like queer people who would not be accepted by their family or they got found out, and but they also wanted spiritual journey. Um, so I would take them in like without revealing anything and whatever. They would be like my close associates. Um, and yeah, very much God intoxicated life. Um, and then the one prior to that, uh, also these are both in India. Bengal, they're both in Bengal, West Bengal, and the one before the last one was born male. Didn't really have a gender so much, just because that's how it was for that individual. Um, but also in a got intoxicated life and early on having what's known as Brahma Gyan or knowledge of Brahman, like in this life, and basically like an experience where you go into some form of samadhi is essentially Brahma Gyan. You know, became a priest at a Kali temple and just was like God realized and helped people come to know God and that kind of thing. And then the one before that one, which is where I'll stop at, was a yogi in the Himalayas meditating. And towards the very end of that life, came to realize God like firsthand and sat in it and basically left the body in meditation with full awareness.
Fascinating. So like that was the end of his physical life. He just meditated out of his physical self.
Yeah. It was in India. It's called Mahasamadhi, or Great Samadhi, which is like the samadhi you go into and you don't come back from.
That yeah, I've seen photos of that where they'll even being like in a sitting lotus position for days at a time, and they'll just mummify like that. And I can't even imagine the disconnection you have to have from your physical self, because even like astral projection carries its own physical pain that is almost like I can't even imagine sitting up for days at a time. That's insane. Um, if you could give them advice or maybe like how they could achieve higher states of consciousness, where they could start on their journey, what would that advice be to these people?
I would say study scripture and read about it. You can take this however you want, but like scripture, like the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, these are the things I'm familiar with. But study them Um, do the work. Actively meditate, do yoga, and practice cleanliness, and don't like shout at people. Like keep an even tone, and only say things if they're like gonna benefit someone. But sometimes that could be getting angry for circumstances. Meditate daily. But like, what does meditate mean? Really, the best meditation is any meditation you do. Something to focus. Either one thing that I learned is really good if you have like a mind that goes crazy and just can't focus. Focus on nothing. As in, don't focus on any one thing, and just take in your environment, all of it at once. And that itself will build focus because you're practicing being, basically. And you have to have a real strong desire to know. Not knowing has to like eat you up from the inside out. It has to chew you, disintegrate you, and spit you out, never to be seen again. Um, and you know, working on like attachments to things. Um, Very strong attachments to like wanting this to happen this way in my life, and any other way will ruin me. Like that's clearly not helpful to anyone. So to realize like whatever happens, like you don't have control of it. You can do your best and put in effort, but you can't control the outcome of anything ever. That's up to the way this whole universe works, and you're not the only one here. And getting to a point where your mind is calm. If your mind can't be calm and you can't just sit down, you have a lot of work to do. And a lot of work depends on you. It could take 20 years if you aren't that serious. It could take, 5 months if you're really serious. Really depends on you how quickly things go.
All right. Beautifully put, Amber. I've had an amazing time with this interview. Before we get out of here, are there any remarks, anything you feel like we didn't cover that would be important for people to know?
Actually, yeah, we didn't cover that day that was left out of the week before the hospital, where I recovered the memory, which is kind of what gave credence to that statement from the doctors. Like that's the one from Area 51, which was me. So the whole experience lasts like 10 to 15 seconds. I wake up and I'm like looking down like this on a table, but not a horizontal table, a vertical one, and it's metal. And I'm naked, and I can feel the metal, and I can feel like my perspiration, and I know what that contact feels like. And I look up, lift my head up like that, and the room's like empty. It's like white floors, white walls. There's a window on the far side, and the door is cracked open a little bit. And the table's like up against the back wall, like, and I don't see anyone. No one's there. And I start to receive like a signal or some kind of good energy from something that feels otherworldly at the time, but I feel like it could have just been like the circumstances I was in made me think it was that way. And I was like, I'm abducted by aliens or whatever. And so it made me feel that whatever they were doing was for my own good, which when I told that to a friend of mine, they said like that comes across as very sinister. That like it's almost like giving you a date rape drug to like make you fall asleep so I can do what I want with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, okay, I'll go back to sleep, and that was it. And I have no idea where that was. It could have been off planet. It could have been at Area 51. it could have just been aliens themselves, but it had a distinctly human atmosphere, but like like a human atmosphere that like wasn't uh, operating on the same principles of reality that the public human world operates on. But like the door looked human made. It was a human door, human walls, human floor. But yeah, it was very strange, and I could feel that in the timeline of things. It landed right in that day, that lost day.
Talked to a few people with the phenomena of lost time before. That actually seems to be up there as like one or two of the most common things when it comes to any sort of weird experience, like an abduction experience. Yeah, that's scary. Do you remember any other details? I know that it looked human, like it looked like a modern interior and all that. Like you could have been taken to someplace here on Earth and they were operating out of that. But were there any other things that stuck out besides the fact that it looked like a normal freaking human place?
The door was blue. The table was like off from the wall a few inches. Um, Not really. It was pretty bland, a pretty bland atmosphere. Um, and I almost feel like intentionally so.
Yeah.
But I also feel like they didn't expect me to wake up. Um, but I also don't know why no one was actively in the room. But there could also be like, you know, invisibility, whatever going on. Like,
Yeah.
those with this kind of shit. If I'm stuck to a wall with no straps and I'm just on that, like, who knows what's going on, basically. So.
Yeah, no one knows what's going on. That's why I made this channel. I'm trying to get all the freaking normal people in the world together so that we can finally get what's going on. Because I do have a feeling that something's being pulled over our eyes here. Because this isn't the kind of world we're teaching people in school. Let's put it that way. You aren't going to learn about this in college.
And I will say, to wrap things up a little bit, that basically the amount of energy I came into this life with could have tipped them off, and that's why I felt like I was being monitored from a very young age and things like that. It may not have necessarily been genetic modification. It could have just been my interpretation of what I was sensing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's known that governments around the world have been doing things with psychics for a long time. And, that would be my only reason as to why they were attracted to me and have been attracted to others. Humans and aliens probably. But that same friend who said like that them making me go to sleep with good feelings was sinister, he also mentioned, and obviously this isn't like a peer-reviewed source or anything, but he mentioned having some understanding of the government, like abducting people that are highly spiritually advanced to, one, protect people from like people with lots of power who could do a lot of harm, and also to use people as like war machines, basically. I don't know why I was released, but who knows? I also know like there's sinisterness behind the scenes, and that a part of what's going on is like the destruction of ill will and the triumph of goodness.
Well, that's fascinating, and I deeply appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience. I hope that you opening up is going to help other people remember or feel comfortable coming forward, because as we said, something's going on. I don't know what it is, but it really is something. Amber, it's been great. Here, I'll go ahead and end the recording. Here, I just want to talk to you for a second after end this.